We're going to get started. We want to thank all of you who have joined in. And Patrick, go ahead and take it away.
Hey, first of all, I just want to say to all the people in Austin who are part of this wonderful event, festival, 15 years. People understand 15 years is not an easy task to organize a literary festival. And then we went through a pandemic, and then she comes back after the pandemic, after being shut down, and come back with a wonderful, organized, well put together virtual event. So we have to give a shout out to Sister Oliphant and her, the folks that's working with her. Let's give all of them, a big shout out because we have to understand that's extremely important. And this work is important. I'm so glad that she asked me to be a part of it to celebrate 15 years, a milestone. So yes, I'm part of a milestone today, and so are you, those who are joining in. Uh, uh, Powerhouse, like she said, packed panel. So I'm gonna just jump right into it because literature is so important to our community that oftentimes we forget. Folks try to keep us from reading. Now it's almost, not almost, is a continuum. Because when we think about, because we're talking about children's books, we think about the number of books that are being published and printed for and about Black children each year is very limited. So that's why I love the title of this conference, because this is a revolutionary act to have children's books published, to have books celebrating our children. So Vanessa, I just want to kick it off with you. Tony, I'm sorry, but I always go to the beautiful ladies first. So I'm going to start with Vanessa and just, if you don't mind, your life, your love of literature was somewhat of a revolutionary act. It was a resistance, because you use illustration, book illustration, to challenge the way, just to challenge a system that says, no, you don't kind of belong. Just share with our listeners, viewers out there, your story and how it was, again, resistance. It was revolutionary.
Absolutely. My upbringing was a two-parent home, and my mom and dad worked all the time. And so when it came for story time at night, my mom and dad didn't have time to read stories to me and my sister because basically they were pulling 2 and 3 jobs between the two of them. So it was a lot. And so I got to tell my own self stories. And so what looked like didn't serve me really kind of activated me to become a storyteller. And I did it through pictures. Pictures were everything for me. I am a child who was dyslexic, who was put in special ed, who was kind of left there as you're never going to succeed. And they didn't expect anything from me. But it was the way that I drew. So by the time I was 5 years old, I was drawing like somebody who was 10. And then by the time I got 10, I was drawing like somebody who was 15 or 17 or 18. And by the time I got 17 or 18, I was just doing professional work. And so pictures were everything for me. I first saw myself in a picture book when I saw The Snowy Day. It was the year that I was born, 1963. And here comes Ezra Jack Keats, a Jewish man who lived in the hood and had this little boy Peter in his head that he got out and put into this awesome book and got in trouble with Viking Press because he drew a brown boy. They wanted to know, are you trying to make a political statement? What's going on here?
Right.
We don't understand this. And he said, I drew Peter simply because he should have been there all along. If you live on the East Coast, from the top to the bottom, even Florida, children look for snow. They look for an excuse to go out in the snow. And it ain't got nothing to do with their color. I mean, if you're white, does it just snow on all the white people? Or does it just snow on all the Black people? It snows and children love snow. And so that would be the first time that I ever got to see myself. And now in that stead, Patrick, I want to allow every brown child to see themselves beautifully expressed on a piece of paper. They need to see themselves. They need to know that they are beautiful.
Yes. And we must have that. And Brother Medina, your case is similar. You know, New York City. I guess being in New York City, such a diverse city, such a huge city, but we still don't see the kind of representation that we would like to see when we come to uh, books with our children. Think about it. I mean, that's why all the major publishing companies are. It's like the diversity is right in your face, yet you still limited a number of books being published about us. So your early journal, what kind of got you into say, hey, I want to do something about this? What got you into reading? What got you into books and literature?
Well, that was interesting. I came into reading precariously. My upbringing is similar to Vanessa in that, I was a heroin baby. My mother was on heroin when I was born, and it was in the South Bronx in the hospital, and she was afraid to get arrested because she was on drugs. And when I was born, I was, addicted. I had the drug in my system, and I was having these crazy withdrawal symptoms, and the doctors could not understand what was going on. And they pleaded with her. And I learned this so many years later as an adult, that she finally told them and relented, and, they were able to cure me or whatever. Mm-hmm. And wow. My first year was, I was awarded a state. I was raised by a white couple in Queens, until my paternal grandmother fought for me. So when I was raised in the Bronx, South Bronx, and the Throsnick housing projects, I wasn't surrounded by books. The only children's books I recall was when I was in elementary school at PS 72, and we would go to the library, and they would have these sessions, and I would always pick up like a Curious George book or something like that, but never in the household. It wasn't until, the 9th grade when I was in junior high school, and I neglected to do this book report that I was forced to do. And since I didn't, grow up with reading habits and things of that nature, I was too lazy to do it. And I got an F. And so it turned out that the principal didn't like the fact that most of the students failed that, that project, and came down on our teacher. He was our favorite teacher in English, Mr. Dillis Reyes. So he gave us a second chance. He handed out this list that he gave out in the beginning of the year again. And on that list was a book called Flowers for Algernon by, Danielle Keyes. So I took that out that weekend, and I just fell in love with it. And it because I was forced to do something, I got wrapped up in that story, and that's what made me want to be a writer. Fast forward so many years later, there was an opportunity for me to submit for a children's book for, Lee and Low Books. I got this email. This was before the internet and all that stuff. Not the internet, before social media. And so I was like, man, I've been wanting to write about this kid from the projects like myself, named Deshaun. I was using my cousin's name, Deshaun. And I thought it was important because I didn't see any representation of kids from the projects or the hood. I saw middle-class kids, this and that depicted. So I started writing these poems from his vantage point. He was a 10-year-old kid named Deshaun Williams, spelled Deshawn, which that's not the way my cousin spells his name, but I just started writing these poems. I sent them in, and it just clicked. And that became my first children's book, Deshaun Days. And run along, this person who just popped in on us, Cheryl Hudson, became my editor when I wrote a book called Follow-Up Letters to Santa from Kids Who Never Got a Response. And I connected with her and Wade at the Alex Haley farm. And she said, well, send us something. And I sent her that manuscript, and she published it. They published it, and she was my editor. And these were kids from across the country growing up in adverse conditions like myself, like Vanessa and stuff like that. So I just felt like I needed to represent for the people from the hood. And, Ishmael Reed called me the poet laureate of the broke.
That's how it all got started.
Yeah.
Poet laureate of the broke. All right. Hey, Cheryl Willis is in the house. All right, got you.
Thank you so much. Had a little technical difficulties this morning.
Cheryl, you can't get away from us. I know you tried. You're on vacation, trying to do your thing.
Happy anniversary.
Happy
Happy
anniversary.
anniversary.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yes. Hey, Cheryl, I started off talking about how the beginning, each of your work started out as somewhat a resistance and a response, a revolutionary response to a condition you were placed in. Just Us Books, and some people may know it, but I would love for you to share it again. Out of rejection, Just Us Books was founded, and it was a revolutionary act for you and Wade to get Just Us Books started.
Well, Patrick, that's really the case. We started, Wade and I have been working together for more than 50 years on projects, joint projects. Wade is a fine writer, has been a news reporter, a sports reporter, worked in film and television training. And we've been working on creative projects since the early 70s. And it was 17 years after we had worked on a number of projects that had been rejected by major publishing companies that we decided to form our own company. And really it was a revolutionary act, because we said, okay, there are alphabets out here and I had worked in textbook publishing for a number of years with math books and social studies books and readers. And one of the first jobs that I had as an art editor was to color in all of the white faces with skin tones or Ben-Day screens to represent people of color, because in 1969, 1970, there were very few textbooks, even in the school systems, that had representation. And that's ridiculous with the population and our presence on the planet. So getting back to Just Us Books, after having children looking for more than just one book on Martin Luther King or Sojourner Truth or George Washington Carver, Wade and I decided to do a book, and the first book was Afrobets, starting with the letters of the alphabet relating to our kids who were growing up, and that A stood for Africa, A stood for apple, A stood for animal. So you could have a book like that. We got lots of rejections from every publisher in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia, which were the major centers of publishing in 1970. But we took a leap of faith and we published it actually as a self-published book. We said, wait a minute, everybody's rejecting this idea. Somebody said, oh, if you get somebody like Michael Jackson to endorse it, maybe we'll sign on to it, as if that would make it more valid as a subject. So we just took a leap of faith and said, we know how to do this. I had been working in publishing for 17 years, doing textbooks, and Wade had been writing and doing public relations work and working in marketing, managing a band, working in music publishing. So we just decided to pool our resources, do it ourselves. And that was the beginning of Just Us Books. And from that time on, everything has been sort of resistance and representation, because the major publishers were turning down our ideas. But since that time, we've published 100 titles. We've gotten representation. And I think what we have done in terms of the tradition of self-publishing and building our own institution to speak for ourselves with our own stories demonstrated that there was a market for Black books, that there were Black parents who wanted books. There were not just Black parents, but a lot of parents across the United States that wanted representation of the true facts about our history and our culture. So I'm kind of get on the soapbox about that, but it was a necessary step and revolutionary in the sense that, traditionally, I mean, we weren't allowed to read the Bible. It was against the law to learn how to read and write. How crazy is that? So it was revolutionary to take matters into your own hands and publish and speak for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not a soapbox. It's a necessary conversation. It's a necessary things to say in these times, because think about the literature that you are writing, publishing, Tony and Vanessa. It is to save children's lives. Because when we think about it, all of you, the work that I look at your work, you're talking about definition, self-discovery. That's what you're doing and saying to young people. This is your place. This is your space in society. Tony, I want you to talk a little bit about, the stuff you do with boys, 13 ways. I mean, we think about what's happening to Black boys around the country. That book is so necessary right now. Yeah. Yep. 13. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Jane Cortez has this great line in one of her poems where she talks about, she says, we're programmed to self-destruct. And remember Malana Karanga used to say that, we're trying to build the conscious and self-esteem, which is an extension of what Langston was doing and Du Bois and Jesse Redmond Fawcett. You got to be able to protect the imagination of our kids, our children, and you got to open it up so that they can have their own, idea and sense of self and self-esteem in order to be the best that they could possibly be, which is basically a lineage of where they come from.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where the society is constantly taking it away from them, even carting them off into prisons and injecting them with drugs and in the schools and telling them that they're not no one and pushing them to the sidelines and stuff like that. And the fact that we have a culture and media that literally obliterates their reality on a daily basis, and we constantly have to fight over that. I mean, this is what, over like a year since the pandemic and a year since the Black Lives Matter took to the streets in the name of George Floyd, and in a year where all of these white institutions and publishing houses started to say, oh my God, this thing, racism exists. We got to do something about it. And now all of a sudden they're trying to publish, doing the things that basically Cheryl and Wade have been doing, with their cohorts in the 60s and 70s, like Tom Feelings and George Floyd and all these folks. I mean, George Ford and all these folks. I mean, it's a battle constantly, as Karenga said back in the day, for the minds of Black, brown children in this culture, in this world. Yeah. And that's what these books do. These stories do.
It's so unfortunate. It's fortunate, but so unfortunate that we have to recognize, I want to recognize that Black people exist, Black children exist, Black joy exists. For a long period of time, you would look in the trade and you would see maybe a picture of a Black girl on the cover of a book. Very rarely would you see the cover of a Black boy. I mean, Derek Barnes and Gordon James did a wonderful job with their titles that they were winning the Caldecott and the Newbery and the Kirkus Awards for Crown, and for the follow-up book to it, I can't remember the title right now, but those are expressions of Black joy and presence and pride, which in another era, maybe not even 10 years ago, would be considered, this is an angry Black book. You got an angry Black kid on the cover. So that's not something that major publishers would be interested in doing. Vanessa has done beautiful work with beautiful Black girls on the cover wearing glasses, exploring themselves. There have been so many other authors who have come out of this period. And again, I think kind of forced by the Just Us Books presence in the marketplace to say that there's something to this. People will buy these books. Somebody's hungry for regular everyday life. Jamal's Busy Day, even Tony's book, we published a book of poetry. The President Looks Like Me. Okay, that's revolutionary, because that was during the time of Barack Obama, where you had a president and you could see in a children's book, the child said, well, I want to grow up to be president. Well, yes, you can, because here he is. And here are some poems about what you look like and what you feel like. And they're all not social reactionary or somebody standing on the margins of society and waiting to be welcomed in. That's just an assertion of self. And that's why we need to represent. And I'm not going to just keep on doing that. But
it really takes me, it really takes me to what I was going to talk to Vanessa about is her wonderful books. Because, Tony just talked about why he did 13 Ways. And like you said, Cheryl, I just love these last two books that Vanessa did, Becoming Vanessa and then Just Like Me. Those are, that's Black Girl Magic, that's celebrating, self-discovery, all of that. I mean, the color, and her being an illustrator means so much to the process. So Vanessa, those two books, thank you so much. I mean, just share with our folks, not necessarily why, but it was like something got into you and said, hey, I got to do this.
When we send this message, and it's America, it's the world, honestly, that Black is dangerous, Black hurts you, Black is scary, but then you tell me that I'm nothing all at the same time. So how can nothing be scary? It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my whole entire life. And what I wanted to do with these books was to let every child, I didn't care whether it was a white child that picked up the book or a Black child, but in particular, yes, Black girls. I wanted them to look at themselves and say, you know what? I like my dark skin. I like my kinky hair. I enjoy somebody else's hair or somebody else's smile, and be able to do that. But we can't even teach our children to love themselves. We have to give that to them. Love yourself. Celebrate yourself. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve to see yourself on pages that accentuate your beautifulness with yellows and oranges and pinks and purples and blues all over the place, that you go, I'm so excited about myself. Let me tell you a little bit about me. My whole thing was I wanted to, I guess, put so much into your child's head about how beautiful and awesome they were that it would take the whole world to knock them down. Honestly. If I could just give you a visual, it is something about when we look with our eyes at something, it stays with us. It really does. Sometimes even the negative thing can stay with us. But if I could put a beautiful picture in your head for the rest of your life, that hopefully when you're 12, when you are 22, when you're 34, when you're 50, you'll remember, just like I did when I saw Peter. When I saw Peter, I literally almost jumped off the teacher's lap. I'll never forget, Mrs. Russell had an afro that was so big, it looked like a cloud. When she walked across the floor, it actually bounced with her. It was orange. She wore white go-go boots. I thought she was the fiercest teacher I ever seen in my whole entire life. And the greatest gift she ever gave to me was Peter. And to see that little boy, that meant I existed. I exist. Somebody did a book about me. And so to see my brother here, to see Cheryl and Wade, the avenue that they give us, I almost want to cry, to tell our stories when other people were shutting us down and saying, this don't matter. We as Americans are telling Black children, brown children, that they don't matter when we don't give them books that represent them.
Right. And we're fighting. We're fighting a good fight, Cheryl, you mentioned earlier about what Derek and others are doing with Tony. I see some winning going on, I see some books, that are being published out there that other writers are doing, just as books with We Rise, The Talk, those are, I think they're listening, people are listening to us. They like the content we're creating. So I see optimism as well.
Well, I think there is. We have done a lot of things, and Wade in particular. I really wish that he were kind of here with me. Somebody, we're always together as a kind of a Janus head. It's Wade and Cheryl and Wade, but it is and was just us. And his vision really from taking a sort of an idea about alphabets and making it a brand so that you can use that not only as the letters of the alphabet, but to spell out words. So that's a real intentional kind of plan to say that not only are there ABCs, but they're heroes whose names can be spelled with a letter form of alphabets. And that the series expanded from Book of Black Heroes from A to Z, so you just don't have one hero in a book, which was kind of the standard at the time, but you have 49, and then expanding from that to great women in the struggle. So there are 82 great women, and then they're political leaders, and then they're scientists, healers, and inventors. So it's a conscious building of culture and cultural competency in terms of publishing to see what's possible. And in beyond the biographies and books, we've also in terms of the industry, there have been many titles, mid-list titles that have gone out of print, that were going out of print in the 90s. And we established a part of our imprint called Sankofa. Go back and get it. These books still need to be in print. And Eleanor Tate is one of those people. Carol Boston Weatherford has published with us. And more recently, there have been actually 3 collections of anthologies that we've done in partnership with a larger commercial publisher. We rise, we resist, we raise our voices, and that word resistance is in that collection. This is a multicultural collection of 50 contributors, people from BIPOC people, African-American people from all backgrounds, that talk about the need to share your voice, share your vision, talk about immigration, talk about things that are important. And that book came out of resistance really from the election of the former disgraced so-called president of the United States, in terms of a child's response when the 45 was elected. You know, our grandniece was just distraught. What are we going to do now? This is somebody that, you know, hates immigrants, who hates people with disability, who makes fun of everybody. And that's going to be the president. What are you going to tell the children? So part of our publishing policy and response was, well, what do you tell children? We asked 50 contributors across the board who were friends, people who whose work we respected, Jacqueline Woodson, Kwame Alexander, Tony Medina, Vanessa Newton Bradley, Brantley-Newton. We have, and all of these voices have combined to talk about resistance. Jackie Woodson talked about kindness as a form of resistance. Be kind. And these are things that are so obvious, but they have not necessarily been told in a grand body of the canon of the work that is recognized as such. So an anthology is a way of putting this together. I wanted to say one thing about the talk, which is, this is the most recent title, and I'm not sure if you can see it here, but
move it back. Yeah, right.
Move it back a little bit. Yeah, I've got a holograph going.
Weird.
It's conversations about race, love, and truth. And what we are essentially talking about is telling the truth to our kids. And that's why you get a lot of resistance now and backlash, or starting to see backlash from communities that say they want the truth and want good books for their children, but they resist talking about systemic racism. And again, this book is a collection where authors and illustrators talk about their experiences with the truth, what racism is, what racism means, and not just in terms of the social construct, but what it means in terms of real situations that children deal with on a daily basis that may not be recognized as racism. There's so many things that are microaggressions that we're finding out, and people have responded to that, particularly since the George Floyd incident. And it's just incredible that yesterday was that decision.
The anniversary, yeah.
Yes.
To my audience out there, we're going to be taking some questions here with the next, after we got a questions for Tony and then a question for Vanessa. So get your questions ready. We're going to do about maybe 8 minutes of questions, then we got to sign off and get ready for the next session with Charles Blow, journalist. So let's get ready for that. Tony, I'm going to ask you this question. Vanessa will ask you a separate question. But Tony, you use poetry in a lot of your works, in your books with young people. In any particular, reason why you choose to do that? I mean, is it something that young people embrace? Then Vanessa, I want you to follow up with that. Is your work, working with an author? How capturing that author's words. So I want you to follow up when Tony is coming. Just talk about how do you work with that? A lot of people ask that question often.
Well, I mean, I use poetry. The feedback is bad here. Because I write poetry. So
yeah.
That's my thing. I want to kind of like answer your question by going back to your question about 13 ways of looking at a Black boy. And this is a book that I felt compelled to put together while at the same time I was writing the manuscript to I Am Alfonso Jones. And I Am Alfonso Jones deals with police brutality in a 16-year-old, Black Puerto Rican child in the Bronx and Harlem. And so around the time when we were having all of these police brutality incidents, where people were filming them and we were just bombarded on a daily with all this imagery and all this violence against Black and brown bodies, I was getting really annoyed by the fact that people were constantly saying, we're human, we're human, we're human. They had to constantly reiterate that. I'm like, what is this about? We are. We don't have to say that we are and plead with this this racist culture and government and country to say that we are. And so 13 Ways of Looking at a Black Boy is basically looking at Black boys in their everyday lives, celebrating that, right? And after it came out, I realized that it's totally connected to Langston Hughes, where he says, I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. And so it was a way of shaming the nation for daring to be so violent to our beautiful Black boys and girls,
I am so enamored, what Tony just said. My heart just started fluttering in my chest while you were speaking and doing that poetry. Words mean everything to me. I have something called synesthesia, which is the ability to see, smell, feel, taste, and hear color, but also words take on color for me. So while people speak, Cheryl speaks and I see yellow come from her. And when Tony speaks, there's a cool blue that comes and that blue turns into this deep indigo purple type of thing. And so I'm saying that because when I illustrate people's books, I look at those words and I'll go over those words over and over and over and over again, because being dyslexic, the words don't just sit on the page for me. The words literally do this. That's what they do. So my eyes are constantly going like this when I'm reading, which makes it very, very difficult to read. But what I do sometimes, I'll have my husband come in, or I'll have my sister come in, or even my daughter, and I'll have them sit and read it to me, and I'll make them read it to me with feeling. So it just can't be just read it to me. No, I need you to read it with feeling. And the moment they do that, the pictures start coming to mind. And once I get those pictures in my head, now I can sit and I can just sketch them out and kind of like plan what is this character going to look like? Is this character going to be dark brown? Is it going to be pecan tan? How is it, how is their hair going to be? And so it's really planning it all out. And I don't know before I hear certain things or see certain colors, because names give me color. Names also give me a feeling. And so putting that all on paper is just the funnest thing ever. I love it. I could draw all day long, literally. I just love it. I love creating characters, and I love creating characters from my neighborhood and the hoods. Me and Cheryl both lived in East Orange. East Orange is full of characters. Come on, y'all. We got Whitney Houston that came out of there. Michael B. Jordan was a Brick City boy. I'm a Brick City girl too, as well. East Orange was full of characters. And a lot of times, the people that are in my stories are those characters that I saw walking along the street or my neighbors, and I put them into books. So words, like I said, words, even a simple hello, how you doing? That type of thing puts a character in my head, you know, to put on paper. So definitely that's where my inspiration, absolutely.
That is genius. That is pure genius. You know, particularly when you think about when we talk about dyslexic children, oftentimes schools want to throw them in a corner somewhere and say, hey, you know, use a term to find a way not to work with them in a special kind of way. But to hear you say you see color when people talk, man, it's just, you know, again, a sign of genius. Do we have any questions? If not, I have definitely another question. I'm gonna go to another question, starting with each of you. And just each of you, just share very quickly your maybe literary influences or someone influenced your life that kind of said that made you think, hey, art, you know, is going to be part of my life. Cheryl, you can go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, you know, I'm just floored by Vanessa's process and
yes.
Description, because images are so important. I was a doodler when I drew little characters in the margins of books that I wasn't supposed to, but that with the influence growing up in the South in segregated schools, none of our textbooks had any people of color in them. Very rarely did we have any Christmas cards or something unless you went to the colored section or did something online, which is what I did. I sold colored greeting cards for Christmas. Sometimes that was in the days in the 50s and in the 60s. But what Vanessa has said reminds me of how much visuals are a part of the learning process. And so we have to relearn, and what she is doing in seeing in color and drawing in color and representing children and the neighborhood is that we have to see ourselves and look at one another in East Orange or in the Bronx or in Little Rock, wherever we are. And those representations for us, we talk a lot about, Wade and I do, in terms of history, the history of publishing, is that we're not the first to have established a children's book press. Du Bois did it with the Crisis and the Brownies books in 1921. There were only a few issues published, but that was an attempt to represent Black joy and positiveness and that was done in pictures, in black and white, and in words, and Langston Hughes was a part of that. So there's a long line of legacy in terms of that, in terms of Freedom's Journal, the first Black newspaper in the United States, 1827. So we've always been doing this, but the inspiration, I would say, part of it was the fact that Langston Hughes and my discovery of Langston Hughes and how much music and art and poetry and radio shows and every form of literary expression or creative expression was something that Langston Hughes embraced in his own work and by surrounding himself with Black creatives. And that's what we hope to do and continue to do through what we do as publishers and as writers.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I do have a question very quickly before Tony and Vanessa answer this question from Tamara. She said, I'm a member of a mostly white church that has a preschool. We try to have diverse representation in our children's books. Are there titles you would recommend? I just want to say all the books about any of these authors. Let me start by saying that, start there. Vanessa, Tony, Cheryl, you want to answer that very quickly? Also, the Kurt Scott King Awards, all those books that are American Library Association, all those books that have been awarded. But anybody else want to make any recommendation?
You know what's interesting, Patrick, when you talk about that representation on this, it reminds me of this blog post that Nikki Grimes wrote some years back. And I think she posted it on Facebook or something like that. And I read it. And she talked about how she was at a writer's conference or one of these ALA programs where she's signing books and she's sitting there with her table of books. And a white woman and her white son come to the table. And, they're looking around. The kid starts picking up some of the book covers with Black children on the cover. And his mother immediately snatches the book from his hand and says, "Oh no, this is not for you." And then they walk off. And Nikki Grimes was so incensed. And she said, "Yes, it is, especially for you." You know what I'm saying? Like these stories of all our various cultures and colors and people are especially for the white kids who are being raised to be, and conditioned to be racist in this culture, in this society, from every institution. So it's especially for them. I just want to do real quickly, I just realized that it's the 20th anniversary of my first children's book, Deshaun Days. I wanted to show, and this is R. Gregory Christie's incredible work, and Cheryl knows R. Gregory Christie's work. And this is the projects, and this is Deshaun, and you see, that's Black boy joy, right? And that's the depiction, and that's what I was going for when I did this thing. I can't believe 20 years went by so fast, but go ahead, Vanessa. I don't want to hog too much time.
I love what Tony said. This is, moments like that are just the thing that incense me as well, is when you tell a child, "Oh, that book is not for you." There's a friend of mine, Jessica Harmon, I think it is, and she's the culture queen. I know Cheryl knows her.
Yeah.
The culture queen, and she tells me this wonderful story. So she's at a school visit, and there's a little white girl and a little Black girl, and they're both dressed up as princesses. And the little white girl tells the little Black girl, "You can't be a princess." And she goes, "Why not?" She said, "Because there are no Black princesses." And she goes, "But I'm a princess." And she goes, "There are no Black princesses. What Black princesses do you know?" And the little Black girl is standing there, and she's trying to figure out, "Well, what Black princesses do I know?" And Jessica walks up in her beautiful crown, her gorgeous gown out of kente cloth, and the little white girl just looks up like, and the little Black girl standing there like, what are you looking at? And she goes, there's a queen behind you. And she turns around, and there's Jessica. And it was the moment that touched my heart the most, because this little white girl got to see, hey, not just a Black princess, here's a Black queen right in front of you. And that is the message that I want to send to children when I put little Black boys in rockets, because they can go to outer space. When I put a little Black girl in a chef hat and she becomes a great chef or a princess or whatever, or mermaid, I'm able to give that to every child, so that even white children go, "You know what, that's my friend, and she's a princess." That means everything. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to shut up. Worked in a hospital for 25 years. Okay. I need y'all to hear me. Worked in a hospital for 25 years. And my specialty was drawing bloods on babies. Okay. So I did the smallest fit in your hand, and my hands are very tiny. Smallest fit in my hands, babies. Every race, whether it was Muslim, Jewish, white, Black, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, you name it. I never had a baby say, "Put me down because your arms are too brown." Ever. Never. Babies want three things. Is there a clean diaper when I poop this one out? Is there a bottle with some milk in it? And are your arms and heart strong enough to hold me? We're the ones who teach children racism. And what cracks me up sometimes is I don't know where they got that from. Really? You don't know where they got that from? Oh, I can tell you. Definitely. We can crush this by creating books where all children get to see themselves. But the children who are marginalized, Black children that don't get to see themselves, they need to see themselves now. Now.
Amen. And
Yes.
not only that, Vanessa, but what we say is that picture books are good books make a difference. That's our theme. That's our mantra. Good books, books that depict diversity and inclusion and justice and everyday life. Jamal goes to school. He loves going to school. He's a Black boy. He loves going to school and he enjoys it because it's a day just like his parents' work day, not because he's by the 4th grade, they're setting him up for the cradle to prison pipeline because he is missed his scores on some standardized test. There's so many assumptions within our language and within our culture that we have to crush by presenting positive images. When someone asks about recommendations, I would say go to Brown Bookshelf. They have a wonderful website that spotlights contemporary, historic, and they've been online for 13, 14 years, right on the cusp, so that we celebrate Black history and culture, not just during February, but all year round, every day. And some of the same stories that you told about Jessica and Nikki, about people saying this book is not for you. We've had that same experience of children wanting our alphabet book and parents saying, this is not for you, or pulling them away in posters and things like that. And again, the adults need to be reading children's books that are being published now, because my generation below me, did not have that experience. Anybody born after the Second World War, or would not have had the experience of having any kind of integration or diverse representation in textbooks. And then the textbooks become propaganda that say that the slaves were happy. Now what kind of nonsense is that? And some of those kinds of things are still being perpetuated in textbooks. So we say that adults should be reading children's pictures.
Yes,
that are diverse as well, not just the children, to read themselves. Yeah.
I mean, I'm literally trying to give adults a do-over, honestly. With every children's book that I do, Just Like Me is a book of poetry that, talks about girls, but a little boy can find himself in there as well. It's not just so girly that they can't find themselves in there. They can find themselves in I Love My Body, with my ashy knees and elbows, long, lanky legs that run wobbly. I love these freckles that run up and down my neck like maps, telling me who I am. It's much more than saying that I'm beautiful. It's telling me that I'm the me I'm supposed to be. That's the message that I want to tell children. But it's the adult as well that may not have been mothered or fathered. If I can mother or father you in a book, and you get a poem and a picture that stays indelibly printed on your brain, that gives you a good day on your real bad day, I've done my job.
You've done it. Hey, look, I wish I had 15 more minutes, but your time is up. We have, our time is up. And if I can get 30 seconds, everybody, 30 seconds closing comment. Rod's gonna kill me for this, but 30 seconds, everybody, very quickly, say something, big shout out, 30 seconds.
My 30 seconds is Cheryl Hudson's brilliant idea. Adults need to be reading children's and young adult literature, because that's where you're gonna find the social issues being dealt with, particularly from people of color. And that's where you're gonna find the compassion and the kindness that we need, as Cheryl said, that Jackie Whitson's piece was on in We Rise.
Vanessa?
Read the books.
All right, Vanessa?
Come on.
Get them. Read some children's books. Remember your childhood. Write stories about your childhood. Okay? And see what happens.
Cheryl?
Read.
I say good books make a difference. We keep writing, we keep creating. For people who want more information about what we do from babies to YA, join us on justusbooks.com. But again, check out the Brown Bookshelf that's doing a wonderful job to talk about all these wonderful writers, book creators, and also the books are in print, but you can also have PDFs and you can also have Audible books so you can hear the books read. And that's wonderful in terms of the language and the culture, to hear the books and see the books.
Hey, and what I didn't do in the beginning, and Ross asked me to, hey, I didn't give a shout out to myself. SpeakLoudly.com is my website. The books that we do, I got a vision board guidebook I just put out for young people, and then a writing journal for boys, the Anansi journal is a writing journal for boys. Ross, thank you so much. Folks, don't go away, because up next is Charles Blow, a brilliant journalist. He'll be talking about his book, but we want to again give a big shout out. 15 years for the African American Book Festival, and Roz and her crew.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been an awesome, awesome, awesome panel. And I am so glad we have recorded it and can show it so that we can learn from it and glean information from it for years to come. Thank you to all of the panelists. We have really, really, really been enriched by what you've had to share with us today.